Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're talking about The Report today, which I really fancied. I don't know if you knew too much about it.
No, I barely knew it existed, actually.
I didn't know too much either, but I knew it was Adam Driver. And I knew it was about CIA torture memos and torture reports, which I knew a little bit about. And weirdly, coincidentally, I've been watching old episodes of The Daily Show recently, which was the American satire show that Jon Stewart used to host, now Driver and Annette, from sort of 2010, 2011, when things were kicking up at the time about the torture memos, and Jon Stewart had interviews with people like John Yoo, who had written them. So, some of the stuff in this, particularly early on, was very familiar to me because I was in that headspace a little bit. As the film moves on, it covers a good 10 years between sort of 2004 and 2014 of Adam Driver being a Senate staffer who works for Senator Dianne Feinstein, played by Annette Bening, who I think is great in this. And he is tasked with looking into enhanced interrogation techniques, as they were called by the CIA, to everyone else torture, which was being used at CIA black sites across the world to interrogate Al-Qaeda higher-ups, all sorts of enemy combatants. That's another CIA term, although I don't think it's one that shows up here, but that's a term that's basically used for, we don't want to have to charge you with a crime, we don't want to have to put you through a trial, you're an enemy combatant, we're allowed to take you and do what we like. And in investigating this, it was supposed to last a year. That's the kind of time frame he's given to do this report. It ends up taking several years. He works on it for at least 5, and then he gets to the point where it's going through the fight to actually be released. You go from the Bush administration into the Obama administration, things change, there's still a fight with the CIA about redaction, sort of thing. I think it's a really interesting story that evolves and just kind of keeps on going, and it's dramatic throughout, I think. But the drama kind of changes throughout as the fight changes.
Okay, I must say I didn't think so, but yeah.
In what?
Well, for me, I didn't know anything about it, and I must say it took me a little while to kind of clue in on what was happening. And it wasn't until like 2/3 of the way through that I actually felt a sense of excitement about how it was,
Would that be the point where they're arguing with the CIA about redactions? Because that's, for me, maybe the most dramatic point of the film, or the most exciting.
It was slightly before that. It's the point where the Adam Driver character is being charged.
Right, yeah, because he takes a document in an attempt to speed up the public knowing about this.
Well, actually, I don't think that's what happens. He doesn't.
Well, he takes a document and provides it to the other senator, I forget who it was, and kind of goes above Feinstein's head a little bit, because he works for her.
Yeah.
And he gives it to the other senator who is questioning the new appointee to the CIA on that confirmation hearing. All the stuff I'm saying is like, that is how into the weeds the film gets in terms of detail. It's one of those that is very focused on detail. It's very Amazon Prime-y, which feels like a weird thing to say, but there's something Amazon Prime-y about it. There's something almost brutalist to its aesthetic.
It is quite brutalist, yes.
In a kind of grey, washed out sort of
Yes,
way.
I kind of like that, though.
So do I. And I think in terms of the focus on detail, I mean, it gets into its story incredibly quickly.
Yes.
And I understand what you mean about needing time to start getting into its rhythms and starting getting into the way it talks about things and even just what it's about, really.
Yes, I mean, I suppose my problem is... I'm going to make a conservative statement, I suppose, because my problem really is that it's so much about the procedures. It's the real procedural, right? That actually kind of... The people are almost like bypassed. Like, you don't get a sense of what the protagonists are as people, what their lives are outside of, getting this report done in public. So I think it kind of... It lacks a dimension there. And I think also there's an element in which the film doesn't work as well as it might. Because, of course, like many of these films, it tries to be congratulatory at the end, or self-congratulatory at the end. Yeah, the report has been done. It's out. We're sorry. We're not like that. at the moment where, you know, the US is like jailing children and splitting up from their parents, and they can't even put them back together because they're so disorganized about the documents. Yeah, so...
Yeah, absolutely. There is a sense in which this kind of film, and this film does exactly this, says the reason that this is such a great country, being America, is that we own up to our mistakes, and sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we get the truth out, and that is the most American thing.
Yeah.
It never actually says the most American thing is doing all this shit that needs to be exposed in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, it seems quite American to be torturing people for no good reason. And one of the questions that I'm glad the film eventually got to, but I wanted it to kind of approach throughout, was if torture doesn't work, which is the argument that it makes throughout, and it's what this report, it's a real life report by a guy, Dan Jones, who Adam Driver plays. This report makes this case very clearly that torture, enhanced interrogation techniques, do not work. If they don't work, why did they do it for so long and cover it up, right? And that's the question that it only actually asks. I think even kind of subtextually asks at the end, which is when the reporter actually asks Adam Driver, and he gives that speech.
They didn't answer that question either.
Well, he gives a reason that's to do with fear. He says it's to do with fear. We were all scared after 9/11, and it was knee jerk. And then the fact that they set up a system in which, for it to be legal, it had to work, and if it didn't work, it wasn't legal, meant that they were incentivized to cover it up.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of logical sense to it, but it's not an intuitive sense, I think. Or
there's a real 1984 immoral and ethical and unethical kind of trope there, which is if it works, it's legal. Yeah. Whereas if it doesn't, it's illegal. I mean, you know,
but that's not.
That is an outrage.
I think that's something that the film is criticising. I don't think the film expects us to actually that is something that the CIA is setting up to kind of lie to itself about. Basically, when characters say it has to work, otherwise it's illegal.
But one of despairs for the culture, because I mean, I read Elizabethan history, and the way that the reason why kind of certain kinds of torture were just not acceptable was just because they didn't work, right? For the reasons that people will tell you anything, right? Like to get it to stop. So, I mean, this is just.
But the problem I have with that is less the reasoning that's given. And more the fact that the film doesn't actually attempt to... It's such an important question. Because it's such a huge thing to do to someone, to torture. And so the mechanisms of changing the words around it so that you can get away with it, I think have an effect on kind of feeling better about it yourself and that sort of thing. But the film doesn't approach any of this with that interrogative eye. It's just kind of very flatly tells the story of the report from Adam Driver's side of such, the psychology or the reasoning behind doing something that does not work, does not do what it's supposed to do, at least. That's what I wanted more of. That's what I wanted any of, actually.
Yeah, it's ultimately why I find the film unsatisfying. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an interesting case. It's good that there's publicity about it. I wonder if the publicity couldn't have been done through another form, through an essay or something, right? Like, I think, there's lots of elements that I think the film doesn't really fully explore. So, for example, one of the things that I would be curious to know is whether this torture continued just because it made money for the people involved, right? Because, one of the things that they say is how much money was involved in it.
Yes,
right?
The contractors in particular, the quote-unquote psychologists that they got in to provide scientific support for the.
They made $80 million of it, and they weren't qualified to do anything.
Exactly.
Right? And actually, they even got a $5 million indemnification clause, so that actually, if somebody sued them, they would be compensated, or that money would be there to defend them. I mean, so this is one of just one of those America is a business thing, including its justice system and including the CIA and so on. It's a business. And I would have liked to have seen how that business kind of, works through. I think kind of follow the money here is a more interesting question to me, than follow the bifurcations through which it kind of rationalizes things to itself,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Although I do think that I suppose you can only kind of go so far as what is actually known. Like the film is not conducting its own investigation; it is telling the story of an investigation.
Yes.
On the sort of government, CIA, FBI, institutional side, I think what the question is and what's interesting is the clash of institutions that are all supposed to kind of work for the same. They're all supposed to work for the American people. But actually, there are these huge clashes. You've got the White House, you've got the Senate, you've got the CIA, and they're all fighting with each other and supporting each other at different kind of points and with different reasons, which I think is interesting, particularly when you get to the redaction stuff, and it's the Senate on the one hand, the CIA on the other. And, you know, there's a thing that Americans are very, very keen on their institutions being set up to provide checks and balances. You know, and the Constitution is all about that. They're very keen on how every kind of arm of government overlooks all the others, and they do it at the same time. And that's kind of something that you see dramatised here, I think.
Except here, there's something different, I think, because, you know, I'm not too familiar with the finer aspects of the American Constitution, but it seems to me that it's one thing for a separation of powers to exist between the executive, the Congress, and the Senate. It's another thing altogether for the CIA to be as big a player in these debates as it is. Yeah. I mean, you know, the film posits the CIA as being, you know, at least as big as the Senate, or someone able to take on the Senate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's an equal branch of government almost.
Yeah, like, you know, to the presidency, or, you know, well, theoretically serves the presidency, but, you know, it's got within its power to challenge the Senate, which is not my understanding of it at all. You know?
No, I don't think so. It's a spy agency. That's
exactly.
In theory. You know, which every now and again goes down to South America and overthrows a democratically elected government.
And which actually requires Senate approvals for money and other things.
Yeah.
So, you know, anyway, I don't know. But my point is that I didn't find that satisfying. So, I mean, really kind of, I've seen quite a lot of these procedurals, now that I think of it. So I think in a way one could see All the President's Men as a kind of, you know, a procedural. There was Spotlight, which I think is also a kind of, you know, a procedural. What was the one about the money, you know, the financial system?
Well, there's probably one or two, but you may be thinking of The Big Short.
The Big Short. Yeah, I think these are all films that kind of, you know, have interesting things in common, right?
Right, well, they're talking about institutional kind of abuses of power, to some degree, institutional cover-ups, institutional blindness, and ultimately they're all about institutions, and they're about exposing those institutions' failings.
And they're about methods of exposing them, and what's at stake in hiding, and what's at stake in exposing.
Yeah.
You know, and the tension comes from those things. I didn't think that this, to me, had much tension.
No, I agree with that. It is, I suppose, that when I sort of said it was plainly telling the story, I think that's kind of what I was thinking of, is that it moves from one scene to the next with kind of narrative drive and quite a lot of energy a lot of the time, but the sense of what's in jeopardy for any given character, there isn't much of that at all. Yeah, maybe when you get to there's a sort of light indication at some point in the story when Adam Driver is getting quite frustrated that this story is not being published. This report he worked on for years is not coming out, and he starts to slightly take things into his own hands, which is when he takes that one document, for instance. And Feinstein says, you know, what do you think of Edward Snowden? As a kind of, you know, are you going to be this? Are you going to do that? And when he starts talking to the reporter, there's a question of, is he going to come out? Because I didn't know this guy, so I didn't know whether this report was released as it turns out it was, or whether it was leaked. So it was a question to me. But even then, when that happens, not an awful lot of tension. You're right.
I think this film, what's most attractive about it for me, and really almost the only reason I would recommend it to others, is because Adam Driver carries the film. He's absolutely excellent. But he's excellent in terms of a presence, you know, and kind of in the way that he looks and the way that he moves. Like, he really kind of conveys everything, and he's very appealing, you know. There's a pleasure in just watching him move, actually. So it's both a good performance, but it's also a leading man performance. He's somebody who can carry a film, right?
What's attractive to me about him in this is that he's so normal, which I think is kind of unusual for him. Like, and that maybe sounds like a criticism, but it's not. But he's someone who is very often just a little off-centre in kind of personality or behaviour. It's just something you notice about him. And if you think about him in Girls or Patterson, he's kooky or closed off or something like that.
Yes.
There's some behavioural aspect to him that is off.
Yes.
In here, he is a very normal person.
Yes.
And I think extraordinarily believable. And I think his descent into kind of obsession at one point is almost like Zodiac-esque, like Jake Gyllenhaal kind of with paper strewn around, is quite convincing and affecting.
Anyway, I think, he's got that leading man charisma. He makes you believe in what he says, and he's appealing, all the while, and he really carries the film. And then the other thing is, I think Annette Bening is great. I think hers is a great performance. She kind of indicates character, and, there are little things that she does with her mouth, or the way that she purses her lips, or, that she indicates a mistrust and a kind of a playing the system and a kind of trying to sift truth from what people are saying. I think she's absolutely excellent. And that, to me, would be the reason to see the film.
It's interesting what you said about getting no sense of the characters' lives, because it occurred to me right at the start when you first meet Adam Driver, which is a kind of flash forward bit where he's some years into doing his report, and he mentions to someone that he was in a relationship. He's having a conversation with someone. He says, we split up basically because the work got too much. That's the only thing you hear about a girlfriend.
Yes.
He is...
It's the only thing you hear about his personal life or his private life or anything outside the job.
Yeah, exactly. You never see him at home. He's always in the office.
You never see him at home. You never see him showering. You never even see him eating. So actually, all you find out about him is that he's very involved in this case that he knows to his fingertips. Yeah.
Which I think is the film references 0 Dark 30 at one point.
Yes.
Which is the Catherine Bigelow, Jessica Chastain thing about catching Osama bin Laden, and her character had exactly the same thing going on: obsession with the task. And it's only referencing that he kind of sees the film like a trailer for the film on telly because that's a period of time that the film covers. But I think that seemed very deliberate.
Oh yeah, no, I think that was deliberate.
Like they are the same person.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more than that. I think it's also about what 0 Dark 30 is about.
Yes, yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm glad we saw it. I mean, I subscribe to Amazon Prime, so the question becomes, why did we go see it at the cinema? I'm glad we saw it at the cinema. Yeah, I haven't seen how it looks on Amazon Prime yet, but I think, it's a film that does is demanding of an audience, because actually it asks you to keep all the balls in the air of who is who and what's happening and who is doing what, right? And it is about a foreign country, and actually it's about the minutiae of a foreign country's legislative procedures, right? I mean, frankly, if they were to take us here through procedures in the House of Lords, I wouldn't be able to follow it very well either, right?
Yeah.
So it is asking you to pay attention to all of those things. Yeah, they are almost like plot points. So I think in a way it succeeds in doing a difficult job, but I also think it would have lost me outside the cinema.
I think a pre-existing interest is helpful, if not crucial, but definitely helpful, because, like you say, I had less trouble keeping those balls in the air from the start because this was covering stuff that I was more familiar with, maybe. In terms of watching it at home compared to the cinema, the reason that I went to cinema to see it was because I didn't know it was on Amazon.
Oh, right.
I didn't know this was, as we've since discovered, not produced by Amazon, but picked up by them when it had its premiere at Sundance. So it's being distributed on Amazon as well as in cinemas. And had I known, I don't have Amazon Prime, but I might have watched it with you here. Had we known, I don't know. I'm glad I saw it in cinema. I think it works in the cinema, and I don't think it would work as well at home for the reason that you state.
Yes.
That it might lose your attention.
Yes. I think it will. I mean, this is an ongoing debate, really.
And I don't think it's as bland visually as it looks. I think it kind of does look.
I think it's not bland visually. I mean, actually, I think it does all these interesting things with the concrete and the brutalist architecture and, their interesting use of light. There's an amber light kind of thing happening. So I think it tries to do interesting things visually.
Yeah. I noticed walls in the film quite a lot. Partly that huge concrete outside wall of the skiff, the secure
That's
facility.
what I mean by brutalist architecture.
That's kind of what I referred to. Was thinking of earlier when I referred to brutalism, but also inside, like walls are so important that you get some rooms which are you got, for instance, the skiff, the secure facility is coated with kind of photographs and notes and links and documents, all that kind of classic putting a case together kind of thing. You also get these walls that are kind of anechoic chambers. I don't know exactly why that is, but you get these walls with kind of weird patternings on them. Even that one scene where it's Ted Levine's character, who's become like head of the CIA, having an interview in some room with someone, and it's not a room you see again. It's not even that important a scene, but the wall has this weird thing going on, this kind of bumping texture thing.
I don't know. I mean, I think that the film tries to do visual things, and it succeeds in some of them. I mean, my own favorite shots was, the shot that you get repeated over and over again of Adam Driver jogging, or with his suit kind of going down the steps with the Capitol overlooking, right? So, every time he's going to do something transgressive or that he's going to be approached by another, there's always like the Capitol in the background or something.
Oh yeah, and the Washington Monument as well.
That's right. So I think the film is trying to do stuff. So I think, but I also don't think it succeeds as well as it can.
No.
So
the other one I noticed is when they first try and release the report, and it's like 7,000 pages long, and they're in the room with all the various senators say yay or nay as to whether they should release it. Adam Driver is sat there with the report either side of him, and it's two huge stacks of paper, and it's like the World Trade Center.
Yes.
It's like these twin towers of this report, and there's something in there about how those towers being a symbol of America, and now they've become this as like the symbol of America. The truth is the symbol of America in these reports, but we're not going to let it out.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny, amusing, I suppose, that they gave the end of the film to John McCain, and a speech he gave.
That was weird.
Because I think the thing is with him is, whatever you might think of his politics, he's an American hero. And he was tortured in a POW camp, wasn't he, in Vietnam?
That's right.
And I think that's kind of why they
Which makes
gave
him a loser for Trump, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. He likes his heroes that weren't captured. But so it's a real speech that he gave that they're showing on TV. And in fairness, I don't actually remember what he was saying in the speech, but I'm sure it was along the lines of "This is why America is great."
It was.
The truth comes out.
That's right.
And also why torture is wrong, which I think is part of it. Like, that's an important part of his particular relationship to the torture memos.
I know, but I just don't get that ending, because it does aim for a rah-rah kind of patriotism.
It does, yeah.
And it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because, hello, are you watching the news?
Yeah. And then the other thing they do right after that is give the very, very final end of the film to a quote from George Washington,
yes.
Which is about if you see something wrong. Well, yeah, essentially George Washington is saying in like 1782 language, if you see something, say something.
Yes.
Which is the most American thing, and it does very easily slide itself into those platitudes. Really, the Senate does nothing wrong in this film. The Senate is well, you mentioned Spotlight, right? And the thing to me that is most interesting about Spotlight is that the newspaper that is uncovering this story about sex abuse and paedophilia in the church is part of the story. It's one of the institutions that failed, and that's one of the things they have to realise. We were part of this. That's not anything that this film kind of approaches. The Senate doesn't do anything wrong here. The Senate is part of trying to get it.
But the presidency does.
Yeah, but that's not the Senate.
In the figure of
John Hamm.
John Hamm.
Who represents the president, essentially.
That's right. So, and who's seen as a very compromised figure, which is actually interesting because he is meant to represent Obama.
Yes, yeah.
So
I don't know who he is, actually. I thought he might be Rahm Emanuel, but I don't think he is. And if he is, then Rahm Emanuel should be thrilled. Dennis McDonough. It's not a name I know. He was a White House chief of staff under Obama's second term. There you go. But the thing about kind of sort of saying we are the ones who we need to look at ourselves as well. There's one point where I think it's when he's getting very frustrated, Adam Driver, that this thing isn't coming out, and he says to Annette Bening, if you continue to stall or hide this or whatever, then aren't you part of the cover-up? That's one line of dialogue. It does all that stuff through dialogue. It's a very written film.
Yes, it is.
The guy who wrote and directed it is, what's his name? We just looked it up. Scott Z. Burns, or Scott Z. Burns, being an American. And he's an interesting sort of character. He's mainly a screenwriter. He's only directed this and a film in 2006 called PU-239, which I've never heard of. Apparently it's to do with plutonium in Russia. It seems to have a similar kind of sort of institutional failure, cover-up-y thing going on. He produced An Inconvenient Truth, which is its own sort of institutional failure, cover-up-y thing from 2006, which was the Al Gore film, PowerPoint presentation about climate change that people are only now sort of realising they should have taken seriously at the time. He has screenwritten The Bourne Ultimatum, The Informant, Contagion, Side Effects, The Mercy, which was that boat thing that we never saw.
No, I didn't see that, but I've seen all the others. I've seen Side Effects, and then in fact this was produced by Soderbergh, this film.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
I didn't notice.
He's in the credits, so...
Okay.
I'm surprised to see him in the Bourne film, because this is a very unborn film. It's almost like the opposite of a Bourne film.
Yeah, it's in the kind of detail orientation, but I don't know. I think I can feel a kinship, at the kind of screenplay level. But obviously, in terms of tone and feeling and direction, it's on a different scale.
Yes,
different type of thing altogether.
I mean, there is something about the way that the narrative moves backwards and forwards.
Yeah, this keeps going back to during the war and the people who are actually doing the torture, and you see it.
So that's interesting. It's got run-throughs of things that keep repeating, which is whenever he leaves his office, he's read, are you carrying anything, blah, 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 and he always avoids the answer.
Yeah, that's
right.
He
always says something else. See you tomorrow. Have a good night. He never actually
says no, does he?
Yeah. So
yes.
So I thought something was going to come out of it, though it didn't. Really.
No, especially because that's the start of the film as well. You open on this thing of him stealing the document, and it turns out that that's not the kind of keystone of the film as you think it might be from that. Whereas, for instance, like I think Snowden. I don't remember actually, but I think the Snowden film with Joseph Gordon-Levitt
I haven't seen it. So.
Started off with a similar scene of him taking the stuff, and then you kind of flash back to where he started. But that obviously was, for Snowden, the keystone of his story, because once he stole that, he was on the run. That's not what's happening here. No, I mean, I liked it, and I think a pre-existing interest helps. I'm not sure that it's essential, but it's possible that you get into the weeds watching it on Prime and go, oh, I'm not into it. But I had a very good time.
Well, I can't say I did, though for me the film was worth it. Just to see Adam Driver and Annette Bening, they made it worth it for me. And also Michael C. Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, who is a shadowy figure. He actually doesn't get much dialogue, though he is very present in the film. And I enjoyed watching him seem normal as well, actually.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, he plays somebody a bit shady, but like normal shady, yeah?
He's normal, like government issue, government cover-up guy. Yeah,
exactly. So, so that's that. I actually,
It has too many formulaic elements to it, and it too easily settles for standard issue. America is great for these reasons and not these reasons. Things.
I mean, to give it credit, it moves well, or the narrative moves well, rather than the film moving well. I.e., the narrative moves at a clip. And you're not bored, right? But for me, it just wasn't complex enough, And it also had this element of bad faith. that the film is positing this as something that's unusual to happen in America, and that it's in the past. And actually, it's a nonsense. It's more present than ever. We know of more corruption than ever. This is by no means a moment of American heroism, but actually of a pattern of shameful behavior that it's been engaged with in at least since Vietnam, right? So that whole narrative thing about, oh, we won because we made it public. Well, big deal. Things are coming out in public all the time about what awful deeds have been done in the names of American people.
Well, it has far too simplistic good guys and bad guys, which I would always return to Spotlight as the thing of going, right, realising you're part of the problem. This doesn't have anything like that. The bad guys are here, the good guys are here, and what they're doing is very obviously wrong. And, which is why that question of why did they continue to torture is such an important one, because it is made so abundantly clear that it's not effective in gaining intelligence, that it really demands an answer. Why do it? Film doesn't.
I'm not even buying it on those terms. It's not just that it's not effective in gaining information. It's illegal and against international recognized human rights.
Yeah, but that's not the point.
Well, that's not the film's point.
No, but what I'm saying is, from the CIA's point of view, the reason to torture people is because it's effective.
I know, but
so the question then is,
I don't want to buy those terms.
No, I know, but you gotta let me finish. If the CIA says we do this because it's effective, but then they actually know, as the film makes the point, that they knew it was never effective, then the question is, why did they fight so hard to do it? Why did they continue to do it? And that is what is missing from the film.
Okay, that's one of the things that is missing from the film. So we discussed this earlier. I believe there's a money dimension that's not discussed by the film, right? That it kind of hints at but doesn't say, probably because it'll get sued. Right. So, but I actually don't even buy the film's premise. That the film isn't even critical, or isn't critical enough that actually that's a permissible premise. That it's okay to do anything you want to anybody you want, so long as it gives you new information. There are international statutes. There is international law, that it's going against. Right, so I think the film would have been richer if it had been more intelligent and more complex on all of those issues.
And it doesn't at any point try and make a moral argument. No, and neither the film nor any characters try and make a moral argument. The argument is entirely about kind of what was covered up and whether it was legal or not, and whether they went beyond the bounds of the law.
And that's why the film is not good enough.
Yeah.
Because, you can see how to win a court case or to win this point in the Senate or in committee, that is the line you have to take. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why the film itself should take that line. Yeah. Why it couldn't have additional dimensions and bring in kind of moral and ethical kind of issues on the very premise itself, that Congress and the judiciary committees are working with. Yeah, and create that distance. We understand why the Judiciary Committee has to work with that premise, because that's the way they either win or lose. But the film needn't work with that premise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least Adam Driver and Annette Bening
could have had
some moral framework.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, actually, in that respect, I think it is reflective of the culture, especially the culture of the time, where even on the news, this was always the argument: was, did they exceed the bounds of the law? And the only person I ever remember bringing up the moral dimension, kind of at least in a kind of repetitive sense that it actually mattered, was Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, where he made the argument that it doesn't matter whether it's legal or not, or whether you went beyond the bounds of the law, what laws you set for yourself, it is morally wrong.
Well, I mean, this is the whole thing with the current discussions on Trump's impeachment. Here's somebody with I don't know how many lawsuits of sexual misconduct pending, so it's like an American president has real lawsuits pending. So contrast what's happening here with Prince Andrew at the moment, right? Which, there's an allegation, right? It hasn't been brought to court. There's no lawsuit pending as far as I know. But, he's had to resign. But all... And then here's a president of the United States, involved in 14 kind of sex cases. I mean,
yeah,
it is
and friends with Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein.
Exactly, and part of that Epstein circle. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just gross and disgusting, But it's true that the media doesn't bring up those issues. I mean, a lot of the debate is, is there enough to impeach with him? How partisan are, the Republicans going to be? Will it make it through the Senate, even if it makes it? Yeah, there are different kinds of questions then. What is that person doing as American president? And why are the American people willing to put up with it?
Yeah. Although a film that was about the tension between those two questions, I think, could be quite interesting. One that said the moral question is fundamentally important, but practically important is the legal one. You won't win on the basis of a moral question. You will win on the basis of the legal one.
Yeah. But, a film is not a court case.
No, I'm just sort of thinking out loud.
Anyway.
I liked it, despite a few flaws in there. It is my kind of thing, I've got to say. I like this kind of thing, and people who like this kind of thing will find it to be the kind of thing that they like.
All right, Mr. Tautological. Thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Good.
Bye bye.